A single red silk mask lies soaked in blood on the marble floor of a locked Mayfair ballroom, while the orchestra keeps playing a ghostly waltz, and every guest swears the dead man was dancing alone moments before. Welcome to the story of Poirot and the Society of the Scarlet Mask. Grab a cup of tea or take your seat, because chills are coming. If you love a proper locked-room murder that not even Houdini could escape, then smash that subscribe button right now. Your support means the world to us, and drop in the comments where in the world you are watching from tonight. Chapter 1: The Night the Music Never Stopped. London in the winter of 1936 glittered like a diamond set in fog, and the great houses of Mayfair threw open their doors every night to rivers of champagne and whispers of scandal that could ruin dukes before breakfast. On the 23rd of November, the Albion Club, an ancient and terrifyingly exclusive establishment on Park Lane, sent out exactly 100 invitations, each sealed in scarlet wax and embroidered with a tiny silk mask. To receive one meant you had finally arrived in the only circle that mattered. To be left off the list meant you smiled tightly for the rest of the season and pretended you had never cared. Hercule Poirot very nearly sent his regrets. He told himself these cold English aristocrats with their frozen faces and older grudges bored him beyond endurance. Yet when the heavy cream envelope arrived, addressed in flowing purple ink and carrying the faint perfume of absinthe mixed with gunpowder, his little gray cells stirred at once. Curiosity is a cruel mistress, and she won. He ordered a new evening cape of midnight black and the simplest black domino mask money could buy. Captain Hastings, who was staying at the flat, declared he would come along to protect the champagne from waste. Poirot merely twitched his mustache and said nothing. They arrived just after 10:30 in a taxi that smelled of wet wool and tobacco. The Albion Club rose before them like a wedding cake carved from white stone and gold, with windows blazing against the foggy night. Liveried footmen swept away coats, and a hush fell the instant Poirot crossed the threshold. Even behind masks, people recognized the perfectly waxed mustaches and the neat little figure who seemed to balance the entire room on the point of his patent leather shoe. The ballroom itself was a fever dream of scarlet and gold. 3 immense chandeliers poured molten light over a floor polished until it reflected every flame like black ice. A full orchestra in white tie played Heir and Strauss without the slightest pause. Every single guest wore scarlet domino masks, scarlet sashes, scarlet gloves, and scarlet feathers or carnations that looked like fresh wounds against white linen. Only Poirot remained in severe black, and he enjoyed the contrast immensely. At 11 o'clock precisely, the chimes rang out, and Lord Archibald Voss appeared on the marble balcony above the dancers. Once the handsomest man in England, he was now thin and yellow as old parchment, with eyes that burned like coals. His full-face mask of scarlet silk was stitched all over with tiny black devils that seemed to wriggle when he moved. His voice, though soft, carried to every corner of the vast room. Welcome, my dear conspirators, to the annual gathering of the Society of the Scarlet Mask. Tonight we dance with danger and drink to secrets that could topple empires. Remember our sacred and only rule. Once the orchestra begins, no one leaves this room until dawn. Doors are locked, windows barred, masks remain in place. To remove a mask is to forfeit one's life. The guests applauded like wicked children, promised the most delicious dare. Poirot raised one eyebrow. He had heard more frightening threats from angry landladies. Still, he watched the great iron doors close with a clang that echoed like a prison gate, and saw the footman turn the key before bowing and disappearing. Midnight came and went in a whirl of laughter and flying skirts. The dancing grew wilder. Couples spun in perfect formation, then broke apart with breathless laughter behind crimson silk. Champagne appeared as if conjured from thin air. Hastings' face shone with heat and triumph as he informed a duchess that her eyes were exactly the color of revolver barrels. Poirot stood near the musicians, sipping plain water and studying feet, because feet never lie. Then, at 12:37 exactly, the chandeliers flickered once. A single sharp scream cut through the music, yet the orchestra never missed a beat. Every dancer froze mid-step. In the very center of the floor, a young man in flawless evening dress lay flat on his back. A scarlet mask covered his face, but bright arterial blood pumped steadily from a neat thin slit across his throat, soaking the white shirt front and spreading in a perfect circle over the marble. The wound was so clean it could only have been made by a razor or an extremely thin blade. Yet no one stood within 6 feet of the body. No weapon lay anywhere on the shining floor. The ring of scarlet-masked guests formed an unbroken circle of horror. The orchestra sailed on into the next waltz because the conductor had not lowered his baton, and tradition here was iron. Poirot moved with the neat speed of a cat. He knelt, examined the body without disturbing it, and noted the strong build, the manicured hands, the cuffs that proclaimed whites, and the guards. The scarlet mask was tied so cruelly tight it had cut into the skin. Poirot lifted the lower edge just enough to see the face beneath. He did not know it. The dead eyes stared up at painted cherubs who would dance on the ceiling forever. Lord Vasse appeared at his side, voice trembling now beneath the embroidered devils. "This is unthinkable. Our rule is absolute. No one in, no one out. We are locked in here with a murderer." Poirot rose, dusted invisible specks from his knees, and spoke in that calm Belgian voice that somehow silenced even panic. "Then, Monseigneur, we have 5 hours until dawn to discover which of your charming guests has blood beneath the scarlet gloves. Because when the sun rises and those doors open, the world will hear of this night, and your precious society will be finished forever. So let us begin at once." He turned to the conductor. "You will continue to play. Music prevents foolish hysteria, and I always think more clearly to a waltz." The orchestra launched into the Blue Danube as though nothing had happened. The frozen couples remained statues of crimson and black. Poirot allowed himself the smallest satisfied smile. Somewhere behind one of those scarlet masks, a murderer was already sweating. The greatest detective in Europe had accepted the challenge. And the long night was only just beginning.
Chapter 2. The Circle of Suspects. Poirot claps his hands once, sharp as a pistol shot, and the sound cuts through the violins like a blade. The guests flinch, but do not move. He walks to the center of the ballroom and stands beside the body so that the ever-widening pool of blood touches the mirror shine of his shoes. "Mon ami," he says softly, yet every masked face turns toward him. "We shall play a little game before the police are called. I require that every person in this room forms one perfect circle around the dead man, shoulders touching, no gaps. The orchestra will keep playing because sudden silence is bad for the nerves. Slowly, like sleepwalkers in Scarlet, the 100 guests obey. They shuffle into a vast ring that encloses the corpse, the detective, and the blood. Hastings finds himself between a duchess dripping diamonds and a young man whose white tie is now speckled red from nervous coughing. Lord Voss remains on the balcony, watching like a yellow skull. Poirot raises one finger, and the circle stops moving. Parfait. Now I can see every one of you, and you can see me. No one will leave this circle until I give permission. To step out is to declare yourself the killer. Are we understood? A ripple of uneasy laughter answers him, but no one tests the threat. Poirot begins to walk slowly around the inside of the ring. His eyes flick from masked face to masked face, from gloved hand to gloved hand. He speaks as he walks, in that calm conversational tone that makes strong men feel suddenly naked. First, we establish the impossible. The doors were locked from inside. The windows are 30 feet above the street and barred with iron that has not been disturbed since the reign of Queen Anne. There are no balconies, no secret passages, no trap doors in this floor. I checked the plans this afternoon because Poirot is never surprised by architecture. Therefore, the murderer is standing in this circle now. The weapon is also here. A thin blade, perhaps a surgical scalpel, perhaps a lady's silver fruit knife, perhaps something more exotic. It is either upon a person, or it has been thrown into the flowers, or the chandeliers, or the punch bowl. We shall discover which. He pauses in front of a tall woman whose scarlet feathers tremble like living flames. "Madame, you screamed. Why?" The woman's voice shakes behind her mask. "He was dancing alone one moment, and the next he fell with blood pouring out. No one touched him, I swear it." Poirot nods kindly. "Exactement. No one touched him, yet his throat was cut so deeply the windpipe was severed. Such a wound requires force and precision. It is not the result of a stumble or a feint. Someone struck with skill and speed while the orchestra covered the small sound a throat makes when it opens." He moves on. A stout man with a scarlet sash mutters that this is outrageous and they should simply telephone Scotland Yard. Poirot smiles without warmth. "My friend, the telephone wires were cut at midnight. Lord Voss confirmed it moments ago with a face like death. We are truly alone. That is why your heart beats so loudly I can almost hear it above the violins." The circle shifts uneasily. Sweat darkens silk at temples. Perfume mixes with the iron smell of blood. Poirot stops again, this time before Hastings. "Captain, you were dancing when the lights flickered. Tell me exactly what you saw." Hastings swallows. "I was waltzing with Lady Cynthia when the chandeliers dimmed for half a second. Everyone hesitated. Then the scream, I looked, and the poor chap was already on the floor. But dash it, Poirot, there was a gap. One moment he was spinning with a lady in emerald velvet, the next he was alone and falling. The lady had vanished into the crowd." Poirot's eyes gleam. An emerald lady among all this scarlet. How very helpful! He raises his voice again. "The dead man danced with a woman in emerald velvet seconds before his death, yet every guest in this room wears only scarlet and black and white. Therefore our emerald lady either changed her dress in the space of a heartbeat, or she was never a guest at all. Both possibilities are deliciously impossible. We have our first ghost." Lord Loss calls down from the balcony. "There is no emerald dress in the cloakroom. I checked myself." Poirot spreads his hands. Then the plot thickens like good soup. But let us return to practicalities. I need the names of the 10 people standing closest to the victim when he fell. Step forward, please, but remain within the circle. 10 masked figures shuffle half a pace inward. Among them, a famous actress whose scarlet lips tremble, a cabinet minister trying to look brave, a young guards officer with shaking knees, and a thin woman whose scarlet gloves are soaked dark at the fingertips. Poirot notices at once. "Madame, you have blood on your gloves." The woman gasps and tries to hide her hands. "It is not possible," she whispers. "I was nowhere near him." Poirot smiles gently. "Exactement. No one touched him, yet his throat was cut so deeply the windpipe was severed. Such a wound requires force and precision. It is not the result of a stumble or a feint. Someone struck with skill and speed while the orchestra covered the small sound a throat makes when it opens." He moves on. A stout man with a scarlet sash mutters that this is outrageous and they should simply telephone Scotland Yard. Poirot smiles without warmth. "My friend, the telephone wires were cut at midnight. Lord Voss confirmed it moments ago with a face like death. We are truly alone. That is why your heart beats so loudly I can almost hear it above the violins." The circle shifts uneasily. Sweat darkens silk at temples. Perfume mixes with the iron smell of blood. Poirot stops again, this time before Hastings. "Captain, you were dancing when the lights flickered. Tell me exactly what you saw." Hastings swallows. "I was waltzing with Lady Cynthia when the chandeliers dimmed for half a second. Everyone hesitated. Then the scream. I looked, and the poor chap was already on the floor. But dash it, Poirot, there was a gap. One moment he was spinning with a lady in emerald velvet, the next he was alone and falling. The lady had vanished into the crowd." Poirot's eyes gleam. An emerald lady among all this scarlet. How very helpful! He raises his voice again. "The dead man danced with a woman in emerald velvet seconds before his death, yet every guest in this room wears only scarlet and black and white. Therefore, our emerald lady either changed her dress in the space of a heartbeat, or she was never a guest at all. Both possibilities are deliciously impossible. We have our first ghost." Lord Voss calls down from the balcony. "There is no emerald dress in the cloakroom. I checked myself." Poirot spreads his hands. "Then the plot thickens like good soup. But let us return to practicalities. I need the names of the 10 people standing closest to the victim when he fell. Step forward, please, but remain within the circle." 10 masked figures shuffle half a pace inward. Among them, a famous actress whose scarlet lips tremble, a cabinet minister trying to look brave, a young guards officer with shaking knees, and a thin woman whose scarlet gloves are soaked dark at the fingertips. Poirot notices at once. "Madame, you have blood on your gloves." The woman gasps and tries to hide her hands. "It is not possible," she whispers. "I was nowhere near him." Poirot smiles gently. "Exactement. No one touched him. But blood does not fly through the air like confetti. It travels on a blade or on skin. We shall test those gloves presently." He turns to the orchestra. "Maestro, a tango, if you please. Something slow and dangerous." The music shifts to a prowling rhythm. Poirot addresses the circle once more. "Now we dance again, but this time no one changes partners. You will dance with the person now on your left. If anyone breaks the chain, I stop the music and that person answers every question I have." The guests stare in horror. "Dance," he repeats softly, "or I begin choosing who is guilty by instinct, and Poirot's instinct is seldom wrong." Slowly couples form. The vast circle becomes 100 rigid pairs moving like marionettes. The dead man lies in the center alone, while the living step carefully around his blood. Poirot watches every foot, every hand, every masked glance. Somewhere in this slow crimson tango, the murderer is praying the little Belgian will miss the one detail that betrays everything. But Hercule Poirot never misses. The music coils on, and the night grows colder, and the next impossible truth is already forming in his mind.
Chapter 3. The Name Beneath the Mask. Poirot lets the tangle prowl for 3 full minutes, while the dancers move like frightened ghosts around the widening stain on the marble, and then, with a small, decisive gesture, he signals the conductor to stop, and the silence that falls is so complete that the blood can be heard dripping, one slow drop at a time, onto the floor. He steps into the very center beside the body and speaks in the quiet voice that somehow carries farther than any shout. Before we go further, the dead man must be given back his name, because a murder without a name is merely a spectacle, and Hercule Poirot does not deal in spectacles. He kneels with surprising grace for such a neat little man, unties the scarlet ribbons that have cut cruel grooves into cold skin, and lifts the mask away. A collective gasp ripples through the circle, because the face beneath is beautiful, in the way only the young and privileged can be. Yet it is also a face that half the room recognizes at once. Lord Edward Carstairs, only son of the Duke of Richmond, youngest member of the cabinet, and the golden boy who was to marry an American heiress before Christmas, stares sightlessly at the painted cherubs above. Several women sway and have to be held upright by their partners. Even Hastings swears under his breath. Poirot merely nods, as though the universe has arranged another small piece exactly where he expected it. So it is the heir to £20 million and the next Prime Minister in 30 years who lies here with his throat opened like a second red smile. This explains why the telephone wires were cut and why the doors were locked from within. Someone wished Carstairs dead tonight, and no one else to leave alive until the deed was done. Lord Voss descends the marble staircase at last, his scarlet devils seeming to crawl across the silk as he moves. His voice is a dry rattle. Carstairs was my godson. He begged to be admitted to the society this year. I warned him the scarlet mask plays dangerous games, but youth believes itself immortal. Poirot turns with dangerous politeness. And what exactly are these games, Monseigneur? Blackmail, political ruin, sometimes a duel fought with antique pistols in the cellars, always behind masks so that no reputation is ever quite destroyed, only bruised. We keep the secrets of the empire safe by holding them over one another's heads. It has worked for 200 years. Poirot absorbs this with a slow blink. Then tonight, someone decided a bruised reputation was not enough. They wanted a corpse. He looks at the 10 guests who stood closest when Carstairs fell. You will remove your masks one by one, beginning on my left. I wish to see the faces that watched a young man die. The first to obey is the famous actress Vivian Leigh. No, not the actress yet, but a woman who will one day be more famous under that name. Her mask comes away to reveal cheekbones sharp enough to cut glass, and eyes bright with fear and defiance, and something colder. Next comes the cabinet minister, Sir Giles Harrow, whose jowls tremble above his collar. Then the young guards officer, the Honourable Felix Trevelyan, whose boyish face has gone the color of candle wax. One by one, the scarlet silk falls away until 9 faces are known, and the 10th, the thin woman with blood-darkened gloves, refuses. I will not, she says in a voice like breaking ice. My husband will kill me if my name were linked to this night. Poirot smiles, the smile of a cat who has found the cream.
Madame, your husband is already trying to kill someone, it seems. Remove the mask, or I shall do it for you. The woman's hands shake so badly that Hastings steps forward and unties the ribbons himself. When the mask drops, the ballroom fills with a different kind of silence, because the face revealed belongs to Mrs. Eleanor Carstairs, the boy's mother, the Duchess of Richmond herself. Her gloves are indeed soaked, and her pale eyes fixed on her dead son with an expression no mother should ever wear. For a moment, even Poirot is still. Then he bows with exquisite courtesy. Madame la Duchesse, your grief does you credit, but grief does not explain why your gloves carry your son's blood when you stood 6 feet away. Eleanor Carstairs lifts her chin. I rushed to him when he fell. I tried to stop the bleeding, that is all. Poirot studies her for a long moment. We shall test that story against the direction of the blood spurt and the height of the wound, but for now you will remain where I can see you. He turns back to the rest of the circle. Now that we know our victim, we must discover why he had to die tonight, of all nights. Lord Voss, you will tell me who proposed Edward Carstairs for membership. Voss hesitates, then shrugs. It was his uncle, Colonel Marcus Carstairs, the boy's brother, the one who would inherit everything if Edward died unmarried and childless. Poirot's mustache twitches with satisfaction. Ah, family! Always the most dangerous society of all. Bring me Colonel Carstairs. From the far side of the circle, a tall, broad-shouldered man in his 50s steps forward. His scarlet mask is already in his hand, revealing a soldier's weathered face and eyes like chips of flint. He looks down at his nephew without visible emotion. I loved the boy, he says quietly, but love and 20 million pounds are rarely comfortable bedfellows. Poirot nods. We shall discuss comfort later. For now, the orchestra will play something gentle, a Strauss waltz perhaps, because the next truth I uncover will not be gentle at all, and I prefer my revelations served with melody. The music begins again, soft and sad and mocking. The guests stand frozen in their crimson and black, while the blood dries to rust around the body of the golden boy who will never be Prime Minister. Poirot walks slowly around the circle once more, but this time his eyes are not on faces. They are on hands, on wrists, on the tiny tremors that betray terror or guilt or both. Somewhere in this room, the blade is still warm, and the little Belgian is only warming up.
Chapter 4. The Emerald Ghost. Poirot stops in the middle of the slowly revolving dancers and raises one small hand, and the orchestra falls silent, so abruptly that a single violin string keeps humming alone for a heartbroken second before it too dies. He speaks into that perfect hush. We have a victim, we have a locked room, and we have a lady in emerald velvet who danced with Lord Edward Carstairs, one heartbeat before his throat opened, yet who has now vanished as completely as smoke. Since no emerald dress exists in the cloakroom, and no woman here admits to wearing one, we must conclude that our ghost either changed her gown in the blink of an eye, or she was never a guest at all. Both solutions are impossible, therefore one of them is true. He turns to Lord Voss, who still stands upon the balcony like a yellowing puppet. Monsignor, you will order every footman and maid in the building to assemble in the anteroom at once. I wish to question them before memories cool. Voss lifts a trembling hand, and 2 servants scurry away. Poirot returns his attention to the scarlet circle.
While we wait, you will resume the dance, but slowly, very slowly. A murderer grows careless when the body believes it is safe. Move, my friends, let the music coax secrets from your feet. The orchestra begins a languid waltz, and the guests obey, gliding like crimson leaves on a dark stream around the place where Edward Carstairs lies, staring at eternity. Hastings finds himself partnered with the Duchess of Richmond, who is pale as chalk, yet glides with the rigid grace of a lifetime spent hiding pain behind manners. He tries a gentle question, but she only whispers, "Do not speak of him yet," and he obeys because even Hastings knows when silence is kinder. Poirot walks against the flow of the dancers, watching hands more than faces. He stops beside a tall, thin man whose scarlet sash is pinned with a tiny enameled fox. "Monsieur, you have a thread of emerald silk caught in your cuff button." The man glances down and pales beneath his mask. "It is nothing. A lady brushed against me earlier." Poirot plucks the thread free with delicate fingers. "A lady in scarlet, perhaps, yet this thread is emerald shot with gold. It did not grow upon your sleeve by accident. We shall keep it safe." He tucks the thread into a small silver box produced from his waistcoat pocket, and moves on. Moments later, he pauses again, this time before a pretty girl whose scarlet feathers are coming adrift with nerves. "Mademoiselle, your left shoe is wet at the toe." She looks down in horror. "I spilled champagne, nothing more." Poirot kneels swiftly, touches the wetness, and brings his finger to the light. "Champagne does not dry rust brown, mademoiselle. That is blood, and it is still warm." The girl bursts into tears, and several guests step away as though guilt might be contagious. At that moment the footmen file in, 12 anxious men in green livery who line up against the gilded wall. Poirot addresses them kindly. "One of you admitted a lady in emerald velvet tonight. She arrived late, perhaps alone, perhaps without invitation. Speak now, and no harm will come to you." Silence. He waits, patient as a spider. Finally, a young footman, barely 20, steps forward, his face the color of milk. "She gave me a sovereign, sir, and said she was expected by Lord Edward. She went straight into the ballroom, and I never saw her leave." Poirot beams. "Describe her." The boy swallows. "Tall, sir, taller than me. Dark hair piled high. Emerald dress cut low. Mask was black, not scarlet. Voice like velvet over steel." Poirot nods. "And when the lights flickered, did you see her again?" "No, sir. She was simply gone." Poirot turns back to the guests. "There we have her, a woman in black mask and emerald velvet, invited by the victim himself. She danced with him once, then vanished the instant he fell. Yet no door opened, no window broke. Therefore she is still among us." He claps his hands sharply. "Ladies, you will now remove your gloves, every one." There's a rustle of silk and kid leather. 100 pairs of scarlet gloves come off, and 99 pairs are spotless. The 100th pair belongs to a slim, quiet woman near the back whose gloves are clean, but whose left wrist bears a fresh scratch, deep enough to have bled. She tries to pull her sleeve down, but Poirot is already there. "Madame, you have been wounded." "A cat, perhaps?" The woman smiles with surprising calm. "A thorn from the flowers on the supper table." Poirot lifts her hand and studies the scratch. It is straight and clean. The edges are sharp. A thorn does not cut with such precision. A razor does, and it is placed exactly where a blade would slip if the hand that held it struck upward beneath a chin. The woman's calm cracks. "I know nothing of any razor." Poirot releases her hand gently. "We shall see." For now you will stand beside the Duchess. Two ladies with blood upon them make a pattern I do not yet dislike." He raises his voice once more. "The emerald ghost has left 3 traces, a thread, a footprint in blood, and a scratch that bleeds. Soon she will leave a 4th, her name." The orchestra strikes up again, this time a quicksilver polka that feels almost cruel in its cheerfulness. The dancers move faster now, driven by fear more than music. Poirot returns to the body, kneels once more, and this time gently unbuttons the dead man's waistcoat. Inside the left breast pocket he finds a small square of emerald silk embroidered with a tiny black fox. He holds it up so the chandeliers catch the color like green fire. Lord Edward kept his ghost close to his heart, and she has left him her calling card. The net tightens, my friends. The night is still young, and the impossible is becoming merely improbable. And Poirot adores the improbable.
Chapter 5. The Fox and the Blade. Poirot holds the square of emerald silk between thumb and forefinger so that every chandelier flame dances across it like green lightning, and the entire ballroom seems to hold its breath. A black fox, no larger than a thumbnail, is embroidered in the corner, with one eye picked out in a single ruby bead that glints like a drop of fresh blood. He speaks softly, yet every ear strains toward him. This little fox has hunted tonight. It has bitten deep into a young man's throat, and now it tries to run. But Hercule Poirot is a very persistent hound. He walks slowly around the circle again, this time carrying the silk held high so that every masked face must look at it. When he reaches the tall, thin man with the scarlet sash and the enameled fox pinned there, he stops. "Monsieur, your family crest is the black fox on green, is it not?" The man stiffens. "It is an old badge, sir, worn by many." Poirot smiles. "Yet this fox was cut from a lady's gown and pressed warm against Lord Edward's heart only minutes ago. Did your wife perhaps lend him her handkerchief to wipe away a kiss or tears?" The man's hand flies to his sash as though the enameled pin has suddenly burned him. "My wife is in Scotland." Poirot nods kindly. "Then the fox has traveled without her. How industrious!" He moves on until he stands before the slim, quiet woman with the razor scratch on her wrist. "Madame, you recognize this embroidery, I think?" She stares at the silk, and for the first time real fear flickers behind her eyes. "It is only a scrap." Poirot shakes his head. "It is a confession sewn in thread." He turns to the circle. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are looking for the owner of a black fox who dances in emerald velvet and cuts throats with the neatness of a surgeon. I believe she is among us, wearing borrowed scarlet over her own skin." At that moment, Hastings, who has been watching the servants rather than the guests, gives a sudden exclamation. "Poirot, I say, look at the 3rd violinist." The man has gone as white as his shirt and is trying to edge behind the double basses. Poirot's eyes narrow. "Monsieur, you are not a violinist at all, are you?" The man freezes. "I was hired only tonight. The usual man took ill." Poirot steps closer. "Remove your mask, please." The violinist hesitates, then unties the scarlet silk. The face beneath is a woman's, delicate, clever, and utterly terrified.
Dark hair is pinned tight beneath the masculine wig, but one loose strand curls against her pale cheek. The orchestra parts like the Red Sea as Poirot approaches. "Your real name, mademoiselle?" She lifts her chin. "Isolde Renard. And yes, the black fox is mine." Gasps ripple outward. Lord Voss leans over the balcony rail as though he might fall. Renard, the actress, the one who vanished from Paris last year after the ambassador was found stabbed in his box at the opera. Isolde smiles without humorless and sharp. "The very same. Though tonight I came only to dance with Edward Carstairs, not to kill him." Poirot studies her face for a long moment. "Yet you carry a violin bow in one hand and blood on the other." She opens her left hand, and a thin stiletto, no longer than a finger, falls ringing onto the marble. It is stained crimson to the hilt. "I found it beside his body," she says quietly. "I picked it up before I realized what I had done. Then the lights came up, and I panicked. I thought if they found me holding the knife, they would hang me before morning. So I hid among the musicians, because no one ever looks at the orchestra twice." Poirot picks up the stiletto with a handkerchief. "Italian, 17th century, beautiful and perfectly balanced for throwing." He looks at Isolde. "You could have thrown this from 6 feet while turning in the dance, and no one would have seen the blade leave your hand." She meets his gaze steadily. "I could have, but I did not. Edward was alive when we parted. He whispered, 'Meet me in the supper room in 10 minutes,' and slipped something into my hand, the emerald square. Then the lights flickered, and when they steadied, he was falling. I saw the blade already in his throat. Someone else struck the blow." Silence. Even the blood seems to stop dripping. Poirot wheezes the stiletto in his palm. "Then we have a second ghost, one who kills and leaves the weapon for another to carry." He turns to the circle. "The dance is over, my friends. You will now sit exactly where you stand. The orchestra will play no more tonight. We move from music to mathematics, because somewhere in this room a murderer has miscalculated, and Hercule Poirot never forgives bad arithmetic." The chandeliers burn lower now, casting long crimson shadows across 100 frightened faces. The blade lies on the floor like a sleeping adder, and the little Belgian's eyes are brighter than any flame. The hunt has truly begun.
Chapter 6. The Six Who Lied. Poirot places the blood-stained stiletto in the emerald silk square and the single green thread side by side on a silver tray, carried by a trembling footman, and orders the tray set upon the grand piano so that every eye in the room is drawn to the small accusing exhibits again and again. Then, with the calm of a priest beginning Mass, he announces that 6 people lie with their mouths, but seldom with their bodies, and tonight the bodies have been eloquent. He has watched the 100 guests for 2 hours, and exactly 6 of them have betrayed themselves by tiny treasons of posture, pulse, or glance. These 6 will now step forward or be named aloud. The first to move before Poirot can speak is Colonel Marcus Carstairs, the dead boy's uncle and heir, who strides into the center with military stiffness and declares that he has nothing to hide, yet the vein beating at his temple tells a different story. Poirot thanks him politely and asks only that he stand beneath the middle chandelier, where the light is merciless. The second is the Duchess of Richmond, follows without waiting to be called, her chin high, but her gloved hands knotted so tightly that the kid leather splits at the seams. The third is the cabinet minister, Sir Giles Harrow, who mutters about privilege and scandal, yet obeys because even prime ministers fear Poirot when he is thorough. Next comes the tall, thin Mr. Reginald Foxbourne, whose enameled fox-pin now seems to leer, and who tries to laugh the summons away, until Poirot quietly repeats the word emerald, and the laugh dies in his throat like a strangled bird. The fourth is a surprising figure, the young guards officer, Felix Trevelyan, barely 22, whose boyish face is slick with sweat, and who keeps glancing toward the locked doors as though escape were still possible. The fifth is a woman few have noticed until now, Lady Diana Morrow, a cool blonde beauty married to an elderly earl, whose eyes have remained fixed on the body with unnatural intensity since the moment the mask was removed. The sixth and last steps forward of her own accord is Isolde Renard, the actress in the ill-fitting tailcoat, who lays the violin bow on the tray beside the stiletto as though surrendering a sword. She says nothing, but her shoulders straighten, and something almost like relief flickers across her features. Poirot surveys the six arranged in a rough semicircle around the dead boy, and nods with grave satisfaction. Here, he says softly, are the only people in this room whose hearts beat faster than the waltz allowed, whose pupils widened at the sight of the blade, and who looked at Edward Carstairs not with simple horror, but with knowledge. He begins to walk around them slowly, the way a surgeon circles a limb he is about to amputate, asking small, gentle questions that feel like scalpel touches. To the colonel he inquires about a debt of £200,000 that only Edward's death erases. To the Duchess he mentions a letter found in her son's pocket threatening to expose her affair with a married diplomat. To Sir Giles he speaks of a bribery scandal that Edward promised to lay before Parliament next week. To Mr. Foxbourne he whispers the name of a wife who fled to Scotland after discovering her husband's forgery of the Richmond signature. To young Trevelyan he recalls a duel fought over a woman's honor that Edward won, leaving the boy dishonored and dismissed from his regiment. And to Lady Diana he simply holds up the emerald silk square and waits until her breath catches, because the black fox was her personal cipher long before Isolde borrowed it for the stage. When he finishes, the six stands as though turned to ruby glass beneath the chandeliers, and the rest of the guests draw back, forming a wider circle of fear and fascination. Poirot raises one finger. 6 motives, sharp as that stiletto. 6 people close enough to strike. 6 separate reasons to see Edward Carstairs dead before dawn. Yet only one hand guided the blade, and the others perhaps helped, or watched, or prayed for success. The night has given me 6 perfect liars, he says, almost tenderly. And now the lies will begin to devour one another, until truth remains. He smiles the small, contented smile of a man who has arranged chess pieces exactly where he wants them. Outside, the fog presses against the windows, but inside the temperature rises with dread. The orchestra sits silent. The blood has dried to black, and the 6 who lied wait for the next question that will break them open like eggs. The clock on the mantel shows 20 minutes past 3. Dawn is still far away, and Poirot is only beginning to enjoy himself.
Chapter 7. The clock strikes 4. Poirot orders every chandelier dimmed until only a single great candelabrum above the body remains blazing, so that the 6 suspects stand in a pool of hard white light, while the rest of the ballroom sinks into crimson gloom.
The effect is theatrical, almost cruel, yet no one protests. The 100 masked guests have become an audience that dares not breathe too loudly. Poirot walks to the grand piano, lifts the silver tray with its 3 small exhibits, the bloodied stiletto wrapped in emerald silk, the green thread, the violin bow, and places it on a small table directly in front of the 6. Then softly, almost conversationally, he begins the process that he calls the peeling of the onion. He starts with the Duchess of Richmond. "Madame," he says, "your son carried in his pocket a letter in your handwriting promising to pay £50,000 to prevent the publication of certain photographs. The photographs were taken in Biarritz last summer with a gentleman who is not your husband. Edward intended to buy them back tonight. Did you come here to plead with him or to silence him forever?" The Duchess does not flinch, but her voice is thin as spun glass when she answers that she came to beg, nothing more, and that her gloves are stained because she cradled her dying child in her arms. Poirot bows, accepting the answer for now, and moves on. Next he turns to Colonel Marcus Carstairs. "Mon colonel," he says, "your nephew's death makes you Duke of Richmond and saves you from bankruptcy. You proposed him for membership knowing the rules of the Scarlet Mask would trap him here tonight. Did you plan the locked room so that no outsider could be blamed?" The colonel's reply is clipped, soldierly. He loved the boy, but love did not pay gambling debts. Still, he swears he never touched the blade. Poirot's eyes glitter. He notes the tiny trimmer in the colonel's left hand, the one that once held the saber at Omdurman, and says only, "We shall see." To Sir Giles Harrow he is gentler, almost sorrowful. "You accepted money from German agents to delay rearmament, and Edward discovered the ledger. He confronted you in White's library only yesterday. Tonight you danced 3 feet from him when the lights flickered. Did your hand move faster than the eye?" Sir Giles blusters about patriotism and forged evidence, but sweat beads beneath his mask, and his denial sounds hollow even to himself. Poirot merely sighs and passes on. Lady Diana Morrow is next. She stands very straight, the cool blonde beauty now pale as candle wax. Poirot holds up the emerald silk with its black fox. "This cipher, madame, was yours before Mademoiselle Renard adopted it for the stage. You wore emerald tonight beneath a scarlet domino that could be slipped off in seconds. You quarreled with Edward in the supper room at midnight. 3 servants heard raised voices. 37 minutes later, he was dead." Lady Diana's answer is soft and deadly. "Yes, we quarreled. He promised marriage and then laughed when I believed him. I hated him, Monsieur Poirot, but I did not kill him. I was in the lady's cloakroom when he fell. 20 women can vouch for me." Poirot smiles. 20 frightened women who will say whatever protects the society. We shall test their memories later. Finally, he comes to Isolde Renard, the actress in the borrowed tailcoat. "Mademoiselle, you carried the blade. You admit it. You loved Edward once, did you not? And when he cast you aside for an heiress, you followed him across the channel with murder in your heart." Isolde laughs, a low, better sound. "I loved him, yes. I also hated him. But I did not kill him. Someone wanted me to hang for it. That is why the stiletto was left for me to find." Poirot studies her for a long moment, then nods as though she had passed some private test. He steps back so that the candelabrum throws his shadow huge across the ceiling. 6 perfect motives, 6 perfect opportunities, yet only 1 perfect murder. The clock on the mantel strikes 4 slow chimes that echo like funeral bells. Dawn is 2 hours away, and the police will come with the sun. But before they arrive, one of you will confess, because the little gray cells have already chosen. I require only the final proof. He claps his hands once sharply. The footmen wheel in a tall object covered in black velvet. When the cloth is pulled away, it reveals a full-length pier glass framed in gilt. "Bring the mirror to the center," Poirot orders. "We are going to let the murderer see exactly what the blade saw in the instant it struck."
The 6 suspects stare at their own reflections as though meeting strangers, and somewhere in the shadowed ballroom a woman begins to sob without sound. The net is drawn so tight now that even breathing seems dangerous, and Poirot's eyes shine with the joy of a hunter who knows the quarry cannot escape.
Chapter 8. The Mirror and the Moment. Poirot orders the great pier glass placed exactly where Edward Carstairs fell, tilted so that the blazing candelabrum behind it throws a fierce white glare across the fatal spot on the marble. The blood has dried to a black map of England, and the reflection shows every detail with merciless clarity. Then, with the calm of a conjurer who has saved his best trick for last, he asks the 6 suspects to stand in a line facing the mirror, while the rest of the guests are pressed back into the shadows. The orchestra has long been silent. The only sound is the soft tick of the mantel clock, and the rustle of 100 scarlet masks as people strain to see. He begins with the simplest of requests. "Colonel Carstairs, take the stiletto from the tray and stand where your nephew stood at 12:37. Hold the blade as though you are about to strike upward beneath the chin." The colonel hesitates, then obeys, gripping the thin steel with the old soldier's competence. Poirot watches the reflection. "Too tall," he murmurs. "The angle would be downward, not upward. The wound rises from left to right." "Thank you, mon colonel. You may return." The colonel's relief is visible, but Poirot's eyes have already moved on. Sir Giles Harrow is next. The cabinet minister's plump fingers fumble the blade awkwardly. The mirror shows a man who has never held anything sharper than a fountain pen. The reflection makes him look ridiculous and frightened. "No," says Poirot gently. "You would have stabbed, not sliced. Return, please." Lady Diana Morrow takes the stiletto with surprising grace, but her wrist trembles and the point wavers. "Too delicate," Poirot decides aloud. "You would have needed both hands and all your hatred. The wound was made with one clean, economical motion. Step back, madame." The Duchess refuses at first, tears glittering beneath her mask, but Poirot's voice softens. "For your son's sake, madame, show us you could not have done it." She lifts the stiletto with aristocratic disdain, yet the mirror betrays her. The angle is perfect. The height is perfect. The strength is there. Poirot says nothing, but his silence is louder than any accusation. The Duchess lowers the stiletto as though it burns and retreats into the shadows of her grief. Isolone Renard takes the weapon last. She balances it on 2 fingers like a thrown knife, spins once with the effortless grace of the stage, and the mirror shows the blade flashing upward in a perfect arc that ends exactly at an imaginary throat. The reflection is so swift, so practiced, that several guests cry out. Isolone smiles without warmth. "I was trained for the theater, monsieur, not for murder. But yes, I could have done it. I did not." She lays the stiletto back on the tray and steps away. Poirot stands alone before the mirror now. He is much shorter than any of the 6, yet in the glass his image seems to grow until it fills the frame. He speaks to the reflection rather than to the room. The murderer, you see, is the only person whose reflection will betray fear when the moment is recreated exactly. Because only the murderer knows what really happened when the lights flickered for half a second. He signals, and every chandelier is extinguished at once. Darkness swallows the ballroom. Only the candelabrum behind the mirror remains, throwing one fierce blade of light across the bloodstain. In that sudden night, a woman screams, not one of the 6, moves. A scarlet figure darts from the back of the crowd toward the grand piano where the tray lies. The stiletto flashes once in the candlelight as it is snatched up. Poirot's voice rings out, calm and terrible. "Maintenant!" The lights blaze again. Hastings and 2 footmen and young Felix Trevelyan have already closed in. The Scarlet figure is pinned against the piano, the stiletto still in her raised hand. The mask is torn away, revealing the face of Miss Sylvia Marsh, private secretary to the Duchess, a quiet mouse of a girl no one has noticed all evening. She is shaking so violently, the stiletto clatters to the floor. "I had to finish it," she whispers. "He promised marriage, then laughed, just like he did with the others. When the lights went out the second time, I slipped the domino over my emerald dress, took the stiletto from Iselone's violin case, where she had hidden it after finding it, and I struck once while everyone looked at the Duchess. I thought the darkness would hide me forever." Her voice breaks. But the mirror remembered. Poirot picks up the fallen stiletto and lays it gently on the tray. The clock strikes the half-hour. Dawn is 90 minutes away. The impossible murder has become merely tragic, and the Society of the Scarlet Mask is finished tonight. He turns to the silent and shattered guests. "You came to dance with danger, mes amis. Instead, danger danced with you, and chose its partner well." Outside, the fog begins to lift, and somewhere far off, a police whistle sounds. The long night is ending, and Hercule Poirot allows himself one small, tired smile. Order, method, and the little gray cells have triumphed again.
Chapter 9. The Confession in the Light. The ballroom, which only moments ago had been a cavern of crimson shadow, is now flooded with unforgiving electric light, as footmen rush to turn every switch. The sudden glare is brutal, scarlet masks look garish, diamonds look cheap, and every face appears 10 years older. Sylvia Marsh stands pinned between Hastings on one side, young Felix Trevelyan on the other, her small body shaking as though a fever has taken her. The stiletto lies where it fell, a thin, accusing finger of steel pointing straight at her heart. No one else moves. Even the Duchess seems turned to stone. Poirot walks forward slowly, almost kindly, and picks up the weapon with his handkerchief. He holds it so the light runs along the blade like liquid ruby. "Mademoiselle Marsh," he says, his voice gentle for the first time all night, "you have tried to kill twice in the space of 5 hours. The first time, for silence, is finished." Sylvia lifts her head. Tears have cut pale channels through the rice powder on her cheeks. "I never meant the second time to fail," she whispers. "When the lights came back and you began the mirror game, I knew you were closing the circle. I thought if I could reach the knife and threaten you, perhaps the doors would open in the confusion and I could vanish into the fog. A stupid, desperate thought. I see that now." Poirot nods, encouraging. "Begin at the beginning, ma petite. The truth is owed to the dead boy and to yourself." She draws a long, shuddering breath. "I have been private secretary to the Duchess for 3 years. Quiet, invisible, reliable Sylvia, who fetches shawls and writes letters and listens at keyholes because no one notices the mouse. 18 months ago, Lord Edward noticed me. He was kind at first, then passionate. He swore he would marry me the moment he came into his inheritance. I believed him because I was lonely and he was golden and I was very foolish. Last month he laughed in my face and told me he was announcing his engagement to the American heiress at Christmas. He said a duke's son could not marry his mother's secretary. He said it in front of the entire house party at Richmond. Everyone laughed with him." The Duchess makes a small choked sound, but does not speak. Sylvia's eyes never leave Poirot. "I came tonight wearing the emerald gown I had bought for the wedding that would never happen. I paid the footman a sovereign to let me in without invitation. Edward saw me across the ballroom and went pale. He pulled me into the supper room at midnight and begged me to leave quietly, offered me money, a cottage, anything if I would only disappear. When I refused, he became angry, said he would have me thrown out. I took the stiletto from my garter. I had carried it for weeks, telling myself it was only for protection. When the lights flickered at 12:37, I stepped in close as though to plead again, slipped the scarlet domino over my shoulders to hide the green dress, and struck once upward beneath his chin. The orchestra covered the sound, the darkness covered the deed. I let the domino fall, melted back into the crowd, and became invisible again. Isolde Renard gives a low, bitter laugh. And I, like the perfect scapegoat, picked up the knife you left behind and ran straight into your trap. Sylvia nods. I saw you do it. I knew your history with Edward in Paris. I thought the blame would fall on you, and the society would close ranks to protect its own. Poirot turns to the Duchess. And you, madame, knew your son had ruined this girl, yet you protected him. The Duchess's voice is barely audible. I found her crying in the library the day he laughed at her. I gave her a check and told her to go abroad. She tore it up and looked at me with such hatred I was afraid. Tonight, when I saw the emerald silk in his pocket, I understood everything. But a mother protects her child, even when he is a monster. Poirot addresses the room at last. You see how it was done. The locked room was never locked against the murderer. It was locked for her. The Society of the Scarlet Mask, with its sacred rules, provided the perfect cage in which the mouse became the cat. The flickering lights were arranged by Miss Marsh herself. She paid an electrician's mate to tamper with the master switch earlier in the evening. 1/2 second of darkness was all she needed. The rest was misdirection. The emerald dress to suggest an outsider. The stiletto left for another woman to find. The scarlet domino dropped and retrieved in the confusion. Simple, terrible, and almost perfect. He turns back to Sylvia. Almost, because you forgot one thing. Hercule Poirot was here. Sylvia sinks to her knees on the blood-stained marble. I am ready, she says quietly. Only please let me see the sunrise first. I have never seen one from inside a prison. Poirot looks at her for a long moment, then gestures to Hastings. Captain, escort Mademoiselle Marsh to the morning room. Give her coffee and a window that faces east. The police will come soon enough. As Hastings leads her away, she pauses beside the body of Edward Carstairs, reaches out one trembling hand, and closes his staring eyes. I am sorry, she whispers to the dead boy. I loved you too much, and not wisely. Then she walks out between the scarlet masks, without looking back. The great clock strikes 5. Outside, the fog is turning pearl gray with approaching dawn. The Society of the Scarlet Mask is ended forever. Its members will scatter like frightened birds when the doors open. Lord Voss climbs down from the balcony at last, looking 100 years old, and hands Poirot the heavy iron key. Take it, monsieur. The game is over. Poirot weighs the key in his palm, then lays it gently on the silver tray beside the stiletto and the emerald silk. No, monseigneur, he says softly. The game ended the moment a lonely girl believed a golden promises. Everything after was only tragedy wearing a mask. He bows to the silent, broken assembly, turns up the collar of his midnight cape, and walks toward the doors. Behind him, the first pale blade of sunrise cuts through the high windows and falls across the blood-stained floor like a final, merciful curtain. The night is done. Chapter 10. The Dawn and the Truth. The great iron doors of the Albion Club swing open at exactly 6 o'clock, just as the first rose-gold edge of sun touches the rooftops of Mayfair. Scotland Yard's men, led by a very weary Chief Inspector Japp, step inside expecting chaos and find only silence and the smell of cold blood. Poirot stands alone in the center of the ballroom, hands clasped behind his back, the silver tray with its terrible little relics placed at his feet like an offering. The scarlet masks lie discarded on chairs and tables. The guests have vanished into the gray morning, some to country houses, some to embassies, some to ships that sail at noon. Only the guilty and the necessary remain. Japp raises an eyebrow at the kneeling figure of Sylvia Marsh, pale and composed now, drinking a coffee cup empty beside her. "Is this the one, Poirot?" "Yes, my friend, Miss Sylvia Marsh, private secretary, scorned lover, and the hand that guided the stiletto." Japp's men move to take her arms, but Poirot lifts a finger. "One moment, Chief Inspector. There is a second confession still to be spoken aloud, for the sake of completeness." He turns to the small group that has stayed. Hastings, the Duchess of Richmond, supported by young Felix Trevelyan, Colonel Marcus Carstairs, rigid as a statue, and Lord Voss clutching the balcony rail as though it is the only solid thing left in the world. Poirot's voice is quiet but carries to every corner. The murder itself was exactly as Miss Marsh described. 1 half-second of darkness, 1 upward thrust beneath the chin, 1 scarlet domino dropped and retrieved. Yet she could not have done it alone. Someone paid the electrician's mate £20 to tamper with the lights. Someone ensured the doors remained locked even after the scream. Someone whispered to the orchestra to keep playing no matter what happened. Someone, in short, built the perfect cage and then placed the mouse inside it with the cat. He pauses, letting the words settle like dust. That someone was you, madame. He looks directly at Eleanor Carstairs, Duchess of Richmond. A single gasp escapes her, nothing more. Poirot continues without raising his voice. "You discovered in September that your son had ruined Sylvia, and planned to cast her off. You feared not only scandal, but that the girl, quiet and clever, might one day speak and destroy the Richmond name. You gave her money. She refused it. You watched her buy the emerald gown and understood what she intended. So you turned her despair into your weapon. You arranged her to enter unseen. You paid the footman yourself through a third party. You cut the telephone wires. You told the orchestra leader that if music stopped before dawn, every musician would lose his place for life. You made certain the room stayed locked until the deed was done and the blame could be shared among 100 masked throats. Then you stood 6 feet away, watched your own son die, and stained your gloves with his blood so that you could play the grieving mother without suspicion. The Duchess does not deny it. She only lifts her ruined gloves and stares at them as though they belonged to a stranger. "He was rotten," she says of last, voice cracked and old. "Rotten from the day he was born. I thought if he died young, the legend would stay pure. A golden boy cut down before he could tarnish. I thought the world would forgive a mother anything." She looks at Sylvia. "I am sorrier than you will ever know that I used you, child." Sylvia meets her gaze without hatred, only infinite weariness. "You used us both, your grace. He is dead, and I will hang. Your legend is safe." Poirot turns to Colonel Carstairs. "You, Mon Colonel, knew nothing of the murder, but everything of the debts. When you learned Edward was dead, you felt only relief. And you let the night run its course because a duke's coronet is a heavy burden lifted. The colonel inclines his head, a soldier acknowledging defeat. Sir Giles Harrow knew of the bribery ledger and chose silence for the same reason. Lady Diana knew the emerald cipher would point to Isolde and said nothing. Lord Vass knew every secret in this room and feared exposure more than death. All of you, in your separate ways, helped the cage remain closed. He picks up the silver tray and offers it to Jap. 2 prisoners, Chief Inspector, the hand that struck and the mind that planned. The rest are accessories after the fact, but I leave their punishment to their consciences and whatever gods they still believe in. Jap signals and his men move forward. Sylvia rises without assistance and walks between them toward the doors. The Duchess follows, straight-backed now, the last of her pride carrying her like armor. As they reach the threshold, Sylvia pauses, looks back once at the blood-stained marble, then at Poirot. "Thank you, monsieur, for the coffee and the sunrise." Poirot bows, grave and courtly. It was the least a condemned woman deserved, mademoiselle. The doors close. The ballroom is empty, except for Poirot, Hastings, and Jap. Hastings clears his throat. "Rather a rotten business, Poirot." "Yes, my friend. A mother sacrificed her son to preserve a name, and a girl sacrificed her life to avenge a broken heart. Between them, they murdered more than one man. They murdered illusion." He glances at the discarded scarlet masks heaped like fallen petals. The society of the Scarlet Mask is dead. Let us hope nothing quite so poisonous grows in its place. Outside, the winter sun climbs higher, turning the color of fresh blood, fading to ordinary light. Poirot buttons his midnight cape, settles his hat at the perfect angle, and steps into the cold morning air. "Come, Hastings, there is a cafe in Jermyn Street that serves excellent hot chocolate at this hour. After a night among monsters, even Hercule Poirot needs something sweet." And with that, the little Belgian walks away, down Park Lane, neat, immaculate, and utterly alone, while behind him the Albion Club stands silent, its windows already blind with drawn curtains, waiting for the day when men and women will pretend none of this ever happened. But Hercule Poirot will remember. He always remembers. If you have been holding your breath through every twist of this dark tale, thank you for staying until dawn. Drop a like if the ending surprised you, subscribe for more impossible crimes told beside the fire, and tell us in the comments which secret shocked you the most. Your support truly means the world. Until the next locked room opens, good night, or rather, good morning.